You're tuned in to Women in America, the podcast that dives deep into the issues shaping gender equality in the U.S. and beyond. Hosted by Pari and Eve, public health professionals by day, content creators by passion, we bring you expert insights, compelling stories, and actionable strategies to push the fight for equality forward. On this episode of Women in America, we share some of the mental health challenges that come with being in the know and online. Let's dive in.
Woo! It's been a heavy week. It's been a heavy year. It's been a heavy 35 years.
Yeah, but the last couple of days, really hit me hard. Luckily, we take turns having meltdowns, usually. Although I feel like you allowed me to step back and take a break this time, but I feel like in the midst of me taking a few days off from what we do, you also had a hard time with a few things, but we can't go down at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the many benefits of having a duo, right, when we do this.
Yeah.
I often wonder from the perspective of other creators how they just stay in it all the time when it's a barrage. Even like just a general person who's compassionate, empathetic, who gives a shit about this country is tuned in, right? And I know a lot of my friends, they actually feel like it's irresponsible of them for them to tune out, even if they need to, because they have to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then add in the perspective of a creator where like you have to not only know what's going on but be constantly on top of every news story because you have to create content on it and translate it for other folks to be able to hear through like whatever lens you're bringing to the table. And I just feel like it's important for listeners to know that we too are real people and this shit affects us,
Yeah.
But I am glad though that you took some time off. You were only going to take a day, and I was like, "That's ridiculous." I was like, "Take like 2 weeks."
I know. You have to know I was not like clocking how poor my mental health was last week. And then like multiple things collided, at the same time until like my cup filled so high. I was just like, I'm going to have a depressive episode or like a nervous breakdown. Because like you said, we're like constantly bombarded by the news. And then I had done like a post during the conference we went to about like being Jewish and anti-fascist, and the comments on that post, it went viral, and it was with our friend Raven, who her whole platform is being a Black Jewish woman, and it's excellent content. Raven reveals, if you don't already follow her, people should who are listening. Her entire platform is being a Black Jewish woman, I mean, since October 7th, fighting against what's going on in Palestine. She's very, very vocal about that. And, people don't take the time to research what they're looking at. And, I'm used to getting the kind of comments we get about abortion, about being women, and that kind of hate. But the level of comments that we got on that collaboration with Raven was like another level of vitriol that I had not experienced in like the almost 3 years that we've been doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So anti-Semitic. So just like the one comment that keeps playing over and over in my head is give them the gas. Who in this day and age feels comfortable saying that in a public forum to people they don't know?
It is truly impressive the kind of hatred that people feel comfortable spewing from the protection of their screens.
Yeah, because you'll never know who they are. Or
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the time to figure it out. And then on the heels of that, the man and woman got shot outside of a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. last
Mm-hmm.
Thursday
Mm-hmm.
by a guy who was screaming pro-Palestine sentiments, but we know isn't necessarily for Gaza. He's just kind of anti-Semitic. And when the war in Gaza started, I spoke out a few times from a position of being half Jewish. Like I was raised half in the Jewish faith. My dad's Jewish, but I really don't speak about it that often because I don't always know how to talk about it. And in this last week, I actually got scared. And it's the first time that I have felt afraid, as a white woman in America. It was the first time I wasn't just sympathizing with someone else's challenges, but that I was internalizing the threat of somebody might want to harm me because of my faith or how I was born as a Jewish person. And I didn't know how to cope with that.
I mean, it's not exactly something that everyone knows how to cope with,
Yeah.
right?
It was really painful and really scary. And my mind just went to like the worst places of the world and history. And uh, it was rough. So, yeah,
I'm
I'm,
really, I'm really sorry that you experienced that. I was reading comments on that post, and I actually had to stop because I was like, the what I think is so genuinely disturbing about the place that we have come to as a country is that, first of all, that video that you did featured a bunch of Jewish creators who had met up at this conference. Okay. And it was a very simple video where everyone's dancing. And then they had the caption said that it was anti-fascist Jewish meetup.
mm-hmm,
And if anyone was actually paying attention, they would know that almost all of the creators in that video have been
mm-hmm,
vocal about against their own, like the country that leads their own faith.
mm-hmm,
Okay. And like, I'm not, I'm not Jewish, but I have over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, been seeing so many posts from other creators about how hard it has been to receive hatred from the people that they used to consider a community,
mm-hmm,
because they are now unlearning all of these things that they have been taught, right, their entire lives, because they've been exposed to a different kind of media.
mm-hmm,
And I was like, my heart is obviously breaking for so many different types of people. Like, it's breaking for the folks in Palestine, it's breaking for the families that will never see a future. It's also breaking for the Jewish folks here at home who are attempting to do the right thing and stand up against what they believe is, mass violence, and their own community is shutting them down. So it's
mm-hmm.
like, and I think that was when I was reading those comments and even just hearing you talk about it over the last few weeks, it's just so heartbreaking for me, because it's like we are actually all wanting the same things,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys are yelling and chastising and in fact spewing total hatred towards people who are, not to say that there are two sides, but like truly on your side about this, and
Yeah.
not just on your side about this, they have been leveraging their platforms at personal cost to
Mm-hmm.
do this. Like, when you and I started talking about it, our views on every post tanked. Like, we got shadow banned. I mean, we are used to getting shadow banned because we dare to talk about women having rights. How, oh my God, the
How rude.
audacity. But when we were talking about watermelons, which is social media speak for the place that we're referring to, that shadow banned all of our posts, our entire page. Like, and brands chose to stop working with some creators when they were vocal about this. So I'm trying to get people to understand is that, like, you actually, I'm not even sure if I should be trying to get people to understand, because someone who goes and says something like that online is not someone
Mm-hmm.
that I'm ever going to be able to get through to. So my point of this giant diatribe I just went on is simply to say that I'm sorry that you experienced that. It's truly unfair. It should not have happened. And it just goes to show that social media is a place that, for people like us, serves as a platform for advocacy and good things, but it also unfortunately enables some really horrible shit.
Mm-hmm. I think the hardest part for me, outside of like what I was personally trying to cope with and figure out how to navigate in those two examples, was also coming to the realization that people, not everybody, but there's a growing cohort of people out there who don't understand that not all Jews are Zionists, and they don't know how to separate those two things, and they're not taking the time to understand that that's true, and that there's plenty of Jewish people in the US and abroad that stand against what Israel is doing and, like you said, speak out loudly about it. So it's painful to be like grouped in with the other side of our Jewish community that is, okay with committing horrible crimes against humanity when there is a large population of us who are not, and
Yeah.
that we're not like a uniform group of people. We're not a monolith. And that was really painful to realize and understand.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that there's anything that, you know, the creator advocacy space could be doing better to try and get people to understand that? Because I feel like people keep shouting that from the rooftops. Like people are saying that. We've been hearing that for a long time. As I said, like celebrities, people with influence, creators, they're stepping out into these spaces in loud opposition at personal cost. And for some reason, that message is not translating. And I understand that, everyone is coming to the table with different preconceived notions or like different histories. But I guess I'm asking, like, what could we do better as a duo, and what could
Mm.
even other creators do better as to try and communicate this to people?
I mean, I think this is part of what I was wrestling with because I was almost ashamed that I think part of what enables this to continue happening is that not enough people who are Jewish and pro Palestine talk about it online for the reasons that you said. And then when the shooting happened in DC, then that made me afraid for my safety. And then I was ashamed because I was like, oh, actually, I know the solution is to just scream louder to try to reach as many people as possible with this type of messaging. But now I don't want to because I
Yeah.
don't want to be targeted and I don't want to be shot. So, like, I was embarrassed. I'm like, our whole brand is being activists, right? For a range of different issues that we care about. And Gaza is like a major part of what you and I care about. And I feel like I have a huge opportunity to like speak to a community of people that might not listen to you or to listen to others on the internet. And right now, I'm feeling scared to do that, which is not part of the activist brand. We're supposed to be fearless. We're supposed to be able to stand up and speak out when other people don't feel that they have the strength. And last week, I was like, not me. I can't do that. Not today.
I don't think you should be faulting yourself for that at all, right? It also doesn't help that our current administration is actually criminalizing people who are speaking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that with activism and especially creatorhood, which I might have just made up as a term,
I like that term.
creatorhood, you're putting yourself out there in a very public way, and you and I have been a little bit intentional about keeping our actual lives a little bit private because that's something we believe in. But in terms of our passions and our belief systems and our values, they are on full display, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every day and in every context within which we work. And I think that part of that expectation and that brand of like being an activist and being fearless is built on privilege. Like we
Mm-hmm.
have the privilege to be able to afford to be fearless. We have the privilege to be able to say that we can stand up for people that don't necessarily have a voice. We have not needed abortions ourselves, but that doesn't stop us from standing up for women across the country, people with uteruses across the country, and saying that this is a right that should exist, right? And I think that that further speaks to the fact that a lot of creators who are advocates are doing it either from a personal place or from true empathy, which is like
Mm-hmm.
what we need so much more of in this country. Because if we had that, the post that we're talking about, that would never happen. Like there
Yeah.
wouldn't be comments like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to give yourself some grace. Not just you, but all of us, frankly, have to give ourselves some grace when we are dealing with, frankly, a society that has, in my opinion, lost its way a little bit in terms of navigating these like very nuanced and complex emotions and thoughts and issues, right? And it is hard for me to justify or frankly even like say that you and I should continue talking about this stuff sometimes when that is what the response is, right? Because it's like, well, why would we continue to do it if
Mm-hmm.
that's the case? Why would we continue to put ourselves at risk if we could literally get disappeared off the street for this? If people can say horrible things to us? And I will preface this by saying you and I have built a very thick skin because we get a tremendous amount of hatred online
Hmm.
almost on a daily basis. We actually also did a post on that this week showcasing some of the just absolutely horrendous comments in our DMs. But
With Mandy.
yeah, but my point is that think about the fact that you and I have built thick skins and this
Hmm.
still hit you the way that it did, right?
Hmm.
And that to me just speaks to like the amount of anger, the amount of hatred that has been normalized in our society. Like there's no more discourse, there's no more communication, there's no acknowledging that people are have certain viewpoints.
Hmm.
There even isn't an actual investigation into your history. Like nobody even bothered to look at the creators on that post and all the things that we've been talking about for so long,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's even just worth pointing out that when you and I first started talking about Gaza, the first few posts came from me.
Hmm.
And then when you showed up as the white Jewish woman, the vibe in our comments shifted drastically, right? People were like so angry at me for
Yeah.
talking about it. And then they came at you being like, I'm still angry, but you're one of us. So, like, what is happening here? And they were
Yeah.
attempting to understand. But I say that simply to point out that we work really hard, I think, to try and change hearts and minds about what we believe is the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's just not fair, the
Yeah.
response that we get. And
Yeah.
this is one of those cases like there's no justification, there's no reasoning, there's no validity. It is truly just unjust,
Yeah.
you know?
And on that note, like when you were talking about how people react to when you say something versus when I say something from our different contexts, one critique, that's like a polite way to put it, that I get often about when I talk about Gaza or when I talk about racism is that I'm a traitor.
Mm.
So, like, when white people see me talking about racism against Black people, Brown people, or about human rights issues in Gaza, they see it as like undermining the white cause. It's like I'm deceiving white supremacy. And I'm like, yes, that is the point.
No,
That's the whole point.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. Like when I say things on our page, right? People, the kind of hatred I get is like they're not surprised that I'm saying this. They're just
Right.
kind of hating me for the sake of hating me.
Yeah.
But when you say it, and I think that that's what I appreciate about like our white women series is because I do think that white folks do need to hear some of this. But when you say it, people are like, hold on now. You can't be saying this stuff because it hurts us as a collective. And by us,
Right.
they mean the white folks, right?
Right. Also, like, why do you feel like this if you are white? We don't
Yes.
understand. Our brains are short circuiting.
Yeah.
You should be trying to uphold the white patriarchy.
I swear there's like a legitimate social experiment that some researchers could come into just our account and do in terms of like the ways in which you get responses versus I get
Hmm.
responses. And I think that you really nailed it because it is so much of what is happening is threatening the folks who rely on the systems of white supremacy, rely on white levels of privilege to be able to even accomplish the little that they have, right?
Hmm.
And I say the little that they have, I'm being a little bit sassy, but I frankly sometimes when I'm like, oh my God, how have you amounted to so little when your entire society is designed to make you succeed? Like truly. So I'm saying
Yeah.
like when they see like people of color, like black and brown folks do well, I think there's like an intense jealousy that they're bringing to the table. But when they see you, I think they're like, it's a different level of threat because they're like, no, 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 this is the call is coming from inside the house, and we cannot
Hmm.
have people inside the house starting to equate with the people outside the house because then the house is no longer solid and
Right.
no longer stable, right? And I really do think that that is also probably part of the hatred that you receive from your own community when it comes to Gaza because they're seeing the cracks even within what previously used to be their like in their minds was a stronghold, and now
Yeah.
they're like, oh no, even our own people are starting to see the light on this and we need to shut this down.
Well, especially white women, because that's such a large part of why the conservative voting bloc continues to win elections. I mean, eventually we'll get to white men, but like if we can just change the votes of white women, they're the ones who didn't show up for, Democrats in the last election. Every other woman did. So I think when they see a white woman talking about issues that align with the Democratic Party versus Republican, they're like, oh shit, that's a voter. And she's going to convince other white women voters. And that's how we're going to lose our like grasp on controlling the voting blocks that we need.
Yeah. And it's not even hyperbolic what you just said. We have a real life example of that, right? Last year, I know we've talked about this case before, but last year, when the Alabama Supreme Court decided to criminalize IVF, it was turned over in less than a week because
Mm-hmm.
the people who got angry about that were not just liberal women.
Mm-hmm.
They were Republican white Christian women who all of a sudden were like, hold on, this affects us. Everything else you've done so far does not affect us because we
Yeah.
still get abortions whenever we need them. We
Yeah.
just call it a different thing. But this is criminalizing our ability to create families. And the Republicans fell apart. Like literally within 24 hours of that Supreme Court decision, the entire Republican Party was saying 14 different things when normally their message is really one thing, right? And on brand. It's like the one thing that they do well. And we know that this is true. It's not just something you made up on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have seen this happen over and over again. And the reason then Republicans rallied around IVF and Trump called himself the father of IVF, or what was it, the fertilization president?
Both.
Disgusting. Was because the Republican white women were up in arms about this. And they
Yeah.
were like, oh shit, we need to walk this back immediately, and not just walk it back, but like do serious damage control.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because anyone who actually has half a functioning brain cell knows that they didn't actually protect IVF at all. They just talked a lot about it and then walked away again.
Right.
But that's exactly what it is. And
Well, there was good news at the end of that, in that the Supreme Court decision came down and Republicans were totally unprepared for it. So they couldn't control the messaging around it. So white women, conservative women, got really upset. And so the conservative governor, was forced to pass legislation in the state to protect IVF, right? Because people screamed loud enough. People
yeah,
who don't normally stand up against her. And
yeah.
I know this has been like kind of a heavy episode, but we have seen since the election several different examples of when you get up and scream about it, the right voting blocks, unfortunately, we are able to make change. And we have.
Yeah.
We made change in Wisconsin, right? With the judge who got elected, whose name was
Susan Crawford,
Susan
who
Crawford. Yes.
who won despite Elon Musk paying people millions to vote
Right.
the way that he wanted
He
them
tried to
to.
buy the election and he failed because enough people got up and were like, fuck no, we're winning this state Supreme Court judge position because we have to.
Yeah. The
This,
SAVE Act is another example.
mhm,
Actually, I thought that's what you were going to say.
mhm.
The SAVE Act, to remind folks, was the legislation that Texas was trying to pass where they were going to make it that much harder for women to vote, especially married women. And people shut that down because they
Yeah.
were like, absolutely not. And I loved that response because the right was launching an entire campaign being like, none of this is true. It's not attacking women's rights. And people didn't fall for it. And it was like,
Right.
oh, okay, this is amazing. Like people are into and paying attention.
Right.
And Texas is like always where Republicans are always trying to test out what will work. And
Yeah.
so it's been kind of fun to see Texas people shut shit down recently because
Yeah.
just today, we had another big win.
Yeah. Texas was piloting like probably the most anti-woman bill that I've ever seen at the state level, where they, in one bill that did pass the state Senate in Texas, was rolling together a bunch of things that included being able to sue without like going through the attorney general first.
They were trying to criminalize literally just even sending a text message to your friend. Like,
Yeah.
if you texted or talked or mentioned anything related to an abortion to someone in Texas, you could get sued for $100,000. Like, that's
Right.
crazy.
However, they had until Tuesday at midnight to work all of the legislators to get enough support to get it out of committee and onto the House floor. And they couldn't make that happen because enough people were posting, asking their fellow Texans to call their Democratic and Republican House reps to demand that this not make it to the floor. And it worked because now it has been taken down.
And people did it. I think that we should all pat ourselves on the back, whether or not you got involved with that, pat yourselves on the back, because it was a long weekend and these mofos did this shit on purpose. Okay. They did it over a long weekend because they were like, oh, people are going to be disconnected. We're going to set the deadline for Tuesday. No one's going to mobilize. And people mobilized. And
people were like, nah, I'm clocked into this one. Like, it's not enough.
Because we all know that what happens in Texas does not stay in Texas.
Right. And that if it had passed there, like any red state would have been next. But the people rose up, Texans rose up, people rose up in Wisconsin. There was also a judgeship that had been contested since November in North Carolina that was just settled. The candidate who espoused like liberal values finally won after they had going back and forth around this election for the past like since November. So like my point is that in a lot of this darkness, and I know that I'm just coming out of like a mental health crisis, but like what keeps me going is that there are these rays of hope that when you speak up and use your voice that you can make a difference, because we are.
And so take your time to get your rest, because we are all going to stay in this fight long term.
Let's go.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Women in America. Be sure to prioritize rest alongside your activism, because that's what helps us all stay in the fight. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your network, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For additional resources, follow us on social media at Gemma_talks. See you next week.